Nicolas Sarkozy launches a fresh bid to become France's leader again, but will the voters want him back as president? Is the American dream coming to an end? We take a look at how generational issues have become a hot topic in the race for the White House. And with the Rio Olympic flame now extinguished, we head to Tokyo to see how excitement there continues to burn for the 2020 Summer Games. Europe has been facing unprecedented challenges over the last year, and a summit is underway in Italy to try to sort out the future of the Union. Among the issues being discussed by the leaders of Italy, Germany and France is how to coordinate negotiations as Britain prepares to leave the EU. The talks between Matteo Renzi, Angela Merkel and François Hollande are also expected to focus on the economy, the migrant crisis and the conflict in Syria. Well, at a news conference, the Italian Prime Minister emphasised that Europe was still united.
Many people felt that after Brexit that Europe would come to an end, and that's not the case. We respect the choice that has been made by British citizens, but at the same time we want to be able to write a new page for the future. And we're talking about internal security and external security and collaboration between the intelligence services, better integration of the national industries, in particular defence. And those are priorities, absolute priorities.
Well, Naomi Grimley is following the summit in nearby Naples and she joins me now. Naomi, a lot of emphasis that Europe is not at an end, but just how worried are the leaders?
Well, they were certainly trying to accentuate the positive today. And as you heard, Matteo Renzi there saying some people think Europe's at an end, but it's not. Life goes on. So they were stressing things like cooperation when it comes to fighting the security threat, particularly in France. Also, the action they need to put in progress to make sure that genuine refugees are welcomed and looked after in the reception centres at these pinch points of the migrant crisis. They did talk about Brexit. It was almost cursory, though. I can rest assured, though, that behind the scenes they will have been dwelling a lot more on that because they really fear that if it looks too easy for Britain to quit the EU, well, then it might stoke the flames of Euroscepticism elsewhere in the EU. And François Hollande is particularly worried that the National Front will get a boost from Brexit because they too have been talking about a referendum on France's membership of the euro.
A lot of the issues you're talking about there, though, are external. There's not much control that these leaders have over them. So how are they going to meet these challenges?
Well, they talk a lot about cooperation. They're also, incidentally, talking a lot today about sort of engaging the youth of Europe a lot more. And of course, that's because youth unemployment, particularly here in Italy, is a big problem, as it is in Spain and Greece. So one of their solutions today was to find a way to almost sort of rebirth European values and to make sure that the youth of Europe are on side, that they buy into the European project, because, as I said before, they really fear that Euroscepticism could take hold elsewhere in Europe and then the entire project starts fraying at the seams.
So how much of an impact is Brexit playing into all this disenfranchisement or disillusionment that you're talking about?
Well, they're certainly aware that populism is on the rise. I mean, here in Italy, for example, Matteo Renzi faces a referendum not on Europe, but on constitutional reforms later this year. And there are worries that it may be a forum for the Five-Star Movement, which also incidentally shows Eurosceptic strands of thought in its sort of public pronouncements. So there is a worry that maybe other countries could find themselves with these populist forces bubbling to the surface, and Angela Merkel does not want to see an ally like Matteo Renzi falling from grace because of another referendum.
Naomi Grimley joining us there from Naples. Now, France's former Conservative President Nicolas Sarkozy has formally announced that he wants to run for the presidency again in next year's elections and will seek his party's nomination. He was defeated by François Hollande 4 years ago and said he was retiring. But less than 2 years later, he was back in politics. Well, our correspondent Hugh Schofield joins us now from Paris. Hugh, anyone who's followed the career of Nicolas Sarkozy won't be surprised by this. But just what will his decision have? What will the decision have as an impact on the race as a whole?
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting now. It beckons in a 2-month period now in the run-up to the November primaries for his party, the Republicans Party, which are going to be hotly contested, and the result of which probably will determine who will be the next leader. So in a way, the November primary is, in a way, arguably the election. Whoever wins the November primary is odds on to win the election. That's because François Hollande and the left are hopelessly divided. Marine Le Pen, of course, on the far right is, on an upward trajectory. But in any two-horse race, which the second round of French elections always is, she will always be beaten by a majority against her. So the November primary, in which Nicolas Sarkozy is now a candidate, pitting him against other great figures from the French past like Alain Juppé, the Prime Minister from the 1990s. Very exciting. There are a number of candidates in there, but the return of Nicolas Sarkozy does give it this extra oomph because he is above all such a divisive character in France.
Exciting times ahead. Hugh Schofield in Paris, thank you very much indeed. Well, as we heard from the European leaders meeting today, one of the biggest issues is the ongoing migrant crisis. Save the Children says the number of unaccompanied children who've arrived in Italy has doubled over the past year. Many reception centres, which provide accommodation for young people, are now regularly full. Our correspondent Chris Buckler was with a rescue ship when it arrived in the port of Catania in Sicily and sent us this report.
Arriving from Africa, both young and old see Europe's wealth. A different world from the poverty and in some cases turmoil that many are trying to leave behind. But each new face that appears in places like Catania adds to the pressure on resources. And that's particularly true for the children who arrive all too often alone. It's obvious in the city around this port that many live on the fringes of the system that's supposed to protect them, if not completely apart from it. Among the teenagers we found here was Fatah. He travelled by himself from the troubled country of Somalia to try to get an education. We're not showing his face because he's only 14. Are there not dangers for you because your mum's not here, your dad's not here, you're by yourself?
This is dangerous. I want my mama. I want to family. I want to take my mama here. Yes.
So where are you sleeping?
Here.
On the street?
In highway.
In the highway?
Yes.
But that's dangerous.
Dangerous, yes. I want to people help me. I want to school. I want to my future. Yes.
Have you made friends?
Here?
Yeah.
I don't have friend here.
You don't have friends?
Yeah, I don't have friend here.
Given food, water, a place to
Workers from the charity Save the Children were with us when we spoke to Fatah, and they helped to find him somewhere safe to stay that evening. But in towns and cities across Italy, that's becoming increasingly difficult, with reception centres filling up as boats continue to arrive with vulnerable children.
Today there was one girl who was 15 years old from Eritrea and she was 8 months pregnant. Many children choose to continue their journeys alone, and this is extremely dangerous because they're constantly falling at the hands of smugglers and traffickers. They're at risk of exploitation. Many girls are forced into prostitution in order to make their way.
Keeping a separation between the worlds of children and adults is proving to be a challenge here. There are children who simply leave the reception centres, and there's little the staff there can do to stop them. But there is a wider issue. Europe is starting to struggle to provide the education, shelter and stability needed by the unaccompanied children arriving on its shores. For refugees and migrants of all ages, home is both something that's been left behind as well as somewhere they've still to find. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Catania.
During a landmark trial at the International Criminal Court, an Islamist militant has admitted to destroying cultural sites in Timbuktu. He was accused of leading rebel forces who destroyed historic shrines at the World Heritage Site in Mali during 2012. Anna Holligan reports from The Hague.
An effort to destroy culture and community, described as an assault on human dignity. These blows were condemned by the global community, and yet this is the first time someone has been tried at an international court for destroying cultural heritage. Timbuktu was once the international heart of Africa. This UNESCO World Heritage Site was overrun by Islamist militants in the summer of 2012. Al-Mahdi and his so-called morality police are accused of tearing down 9 mausoleums, seen as idolatrous under their strict interpretation of Islamic law. But now, international law has caught up with him. And in another first for the court, the suspect confessed to his crimes and pleaded for forgiveness.
Ladies and gentlemen, with deep regret and great pain, I have to enter a guilty plea. All charges against me are accurate and correct. I am really sorry and I am really remorseful, and I regret all damage that I have caused the community in Timbuktu, my family, and my country, Mali.
His appearance is a victory for a court still struggling to convince its critics it has the power to execute international justice. It has been a remarkable day here at the ICC. The prosecutor Fatou Bensouda told the court attacks on cultural heritage had become a weapon of war. She said the sentence should act as a deterrent and a warning to others that the destruction of cultural treasures would not be tolerated.
By eradicating the mausoleums, Mr. Al-Mahdi intentionally destroyed something that is intangible and immeasurable. Mr. Al-Mahdi himself comes from the Timbuktu region, and as a result was fully aware of the importance of the mausoleums and their significance to the city's inhabitants.
Such is the importance of these recently reconstructed monuments. The prosecutor says stonemasons in the region are considered human treasures. A number of victims are to share their stories during the course of the ICC's first open and shut trial, which is expected to be over by the end of this week. Anna Holligan, BBC News, The Hague.
Quick look now at some of the other day's news. And Turkey's foreign minister says the Islamic State group must be, as he put it, completely cleansed from Syria's northern frontier region. Mevlut Cavusoglu was speaking amid reports that Turkish-backed Syrian rebels are preparing to try to capture the IS-held border town of Jarablus. A wedding reception in Gaziantep was targeted and at least 50 people were killed, the majority of them children. Luxury retailer Ralph Lauren has joined the sportswear company Speedo and announced it's also ending its sponsorship of the US swimmer Ryan Lochte. The decision follows his claim that he'd been robbed at gunpoint in Rio, a story he later admitted was over-exaggerated. An environmental debate is raging in Alberta, Canada, over plans to get more dirty oil out of the ground. Green campaign groups believe it's not possible to increase production while hitting CO2 emission targets. But local politicians point to the industry's huge contribution to Canada's economy as a reason to push ahead. The BBC's Stephen Sacker sent this report from Alberta.
In the remote north of Alberta is a land of bears, caribou, moose and oil men.
We're kind of in the southern end of the Athabasca oil sand deposit, and we're heading to our Christina Lake facility.
This is what a state-of-the-art tar sands oil field looks like. 400 meters down is a rich seam of thick bitumen oil. It has to be liquefied by steam. It is high-energy, high-emissions oil production. Critics call it extreme oil, but Canada is determined to tap it.
If we look out in the next number of decades, oil is still going to be needed as part of the energy mix. We're still going to need renewables. We're going to need all forms of energy.
Fort McMurray is Canada's tar sands boomtown. But in May, whole neighbourhoods were incinerated in a ferocious wildfire they called the Beast. This is what the Beast left behind. Hannah Friedhead used to live in a neat 2-bedroom house.
Welcome to my home.
A very strange pleasure to be here.
The Fort McMurray fire fueled a fierce argument. Is man-made climate change making natural disasters like wildfires more frequent, more severe? And if it is, will Canada turn its back on its vast tar sands reserves?
Get real. They can't walk away from this massive potential resource of oil sands.
It's not just Greenpeace that is saying this. It's, organizations like the International Energy Agency that are saying 3/4 of all remaining fossil fuel reserves need to remain in the ground.
Climate change will test our intelligence, our compassion, and our will.
Canada has a new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. He went to the UN to sign the Paris Climate Accord. Canada is now committed to cutting greenhouse gas emissions 30% by 2030. But big oil brings Canada big money. You see it in Calgary, where the oil companies have their offices. Canada's politicians won't halt the tar sands oil rush, even if it means allowing the industry to increase its emissions by almost half.
In this, sort of short to medium term, 20% of Canadian GDP relies on Alberta's oil and gas industry.
That's the key phrase, though, isn't it? Short
small.
term. Do you worry that here in Alberta you are a part of a problem which is going to cost Canada dear in terms of international reputation?
I think what we're doing in Alberta is we've taken the first steps on the continent and in the industrialized world to recognize that we have a problem and to take action on it. We are leaders in that way, and I will make no apologies for it.
Canada doesn't want to be seen as one of the world's polluting powers, but if it insists on pumping out every drop of tar sands oil, it's a label which might just stick. Stephen Sacker, BBC News, Alberta.
Now, the idea that the next generation will be better off than the one before has always been a powerful part of the American dream. But progress has stalled. Polls show a majority of Americans actually think the future will be worse. This week, we'll be hearing from a number of families, and we start in Southern Virginia.
People here, they take a lot of pride in what they do, and Galax always had a name for making good furniture. It's supported the community for my lifetime, and then my grandparents, my father for a time, not my kids, I wish, but it's changed a lot over the years. I have 2 children, Luke and Kaylee. Luke has asked me from time to time about what I would recommend for him to do. My advice to him was, you need to get an education and look elsewhere.
When the factory started to close and I saw that, people were starting to lose hope in the manufacturing business, that was definitely a breaking point for me, because I knew that there was a possibility that I had no future.
Probably 70–80% of the people here have worked at one time or another in the furniture industry in town. Starting in 2001, factories closed at a rate of 2 a year. We've lost 6 plants in town. A lot of the younger helpers left town and doing different jobs now. It's nothing like I remember. The last time I was through here, it was full of people, machinery, and wood, and it's empty. It's real saddening to see what's left of it.
I am currently in college studying police administration. I want to help people. That's always how I've been. I kind of went back to, when I was little, seeing the cop car go down the road with the blue lights flashing, just kind of wanting to know where they were going.
I would have really enjoyed having my son work with me and learn what I know about the industry, about wood, about what it does for, the community. It's, there's a lot more to it than making a kitchen table or a chair.
And don't get me wrong, just because I'm going to college, doesn't mean that I'm not proud of where my family's come from, what they've done, and how hard they work. I want the manufacturing business to succeed, but it's obvious that the way things are going right now, it's coming to just a slow halt. If I were to have children, I'm not going to recommend it. I'm going to push them to do something different.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by the BBC's Catty Kay. Catty, the economy isn't doing too badly. Unemployment figures are down, the economy is growing, so why aren't people like the Wilsons feeling the benefits?
Because America's becoming a post-manufacturing economy. Between 2000 and 2010, 6 million manufacturing jobs were lost in this country, and that overwhelmingly affects working class people, people without college degrees, like you saw Mr. Wilson there in the report. It also overwhelmingly affects white people, because actually African Americans and Hispanics tended not to have jobs in the manufacturing sector in the first place. So the people that are really being hit by this kind of tectonic shift in the American economy are white working class men.
Now, we're hearing a lot about the importance of white working class men to both campaigns.
Right.
How are they reacting?
It's going to be very interesting to see how the campaigns manage to try to reassure these people that they have a future, because the truth is that if you don't have a college degree in America at the moment, your future doesn't look great in economic terms. It's harder and harder to find jobs, and wages in that sector have been stagnant since the 1970s. Mr. Trump has really appealed to that group of people by attacking immigration. He has said, look, the reason that you're not doing so well is because we have so many immigrants in the country, and both candidates have appealed to that group of people by saying the reason you're not doing so well is because of free trade agreements. It'll be interesting to see in the end which way those groups go, particularly because Democrats historically have managed to do pretty well with working class people.
So a lot to keep our eyes on in the future. Catty Kay, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Well, after 17 days of highs and lows at the Rio Olympics, the Summer Games have finally crossed the finishing line with a colourful closing ceremony. The Olympic flag was handed over to the next summer host city of Tokyo, which is already preparing for the 2020 Games. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes explains.
Well, for Japan's Olympic athletes, that has been a very long flight back from Rio, nearly 24 hours. But in 4 years' time, they'll be staying at home, and the rest of us will be coming here.
The first challenge for any Olympic traveller, getting to the city. And that means taking on Tokyo's slightly terrifying metro system. Somehow I've got to use this to get to the Olympic Park.
I want a transfer ticket, that's why. I need a transfer ticket.
But first, a quick detour to check out the newest Olympic sport. Skateboarding is now officially in for Tokyo 2020. So will it turn young people like this into Olympic fans?
So how do you feel about skateboarding going to be in the Olympics?
Yeah.
Are you excited? Are you going to go watch? What do you want to do?
Yes, I'm excited, but I joined the Olympic in Japan.
You want to join the Olympics in Japan?
Yeah.
On your board?
Yes.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Tokyo is expensive, so get ready for small. I mean really small. For $40 a night, all this can be yours.
Well, it's pretty cozy. Shimizu-san.
Hi.
Konnichiwa.
Nice to see you.
How are you?
Okay,
nice to see you again.
English is another big headache. Nobuko Shimizu speaks it really well, but in Japan, that's still rare.
Okay, let's go. I hear they need 75,000 English speakers. So I wonder, do you feel like you can give up your time for free for the Olympics?
Well, if possible. Well, I can help.
Nobuko is not an Olympic fan. Last year, she led a campaign to have the design for the Olympic Stadium radically changed, and she won.
So what do you think of the new stadium? You must be happy.
Well, I'm not.
You're not happy?
Honestly speaking, I'm not.
Why not?
Because we are talking about the scale is too big, doesn't fit that area.
Wow, that's really strange. According to my map, it says it should be right here. But there's nothing here. Well, they got less than 4 years until July the 24th, 2020. So they'd better hurry up. The clock is ticking.
I just can't believe we're already talking about Tokyo. Now, a king penguin at a Scottish zoo has been made a brigadier in the King of Norway's Guard. How, you may ask, do you think that's happening? Well, the penguin called Nils Olav was given the honour by members of the Guard who are performing at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. Norway presented Edinburgh Zoo with its first king penguin in 1913. 3 of the animals, all called Nils Olav, have been mascots of the Norwegian King's Guard since 1972. Why they couldn't think of anything more imaginative, I don't know, but that's all from the programme. Next, we'll have the weather, but for now, it's goodbye from me and the rest of the team.